My name is Jennifer, and I'm 29 years old. Life hasn't always been kind to me. I lost my parents in a tragic car accident when I was just a child, and with no relatives to care for me, I ended up in an orphanage. For 2 years, I lived in that place, until one day, I was adopted by a wealthy family. They kept my adoption private, choosing to help me without drawing attention to their generosity. Their wealth opened doors to a life of opportunity and comfort, one I had never imagined. As I grew older, my adoptive parents pursued their dream of expanding their business in France, and I began to carve out my own life. It was during this time that I met John, the man who would become my husband, and later, my ex. We met in collège, and it didn't take long for us to form an undeniable connection. John was warm, cheerful, and kind, and I quickly found myself falling for him. Our casual dates turned into something more serious, and soon we were inseparable. It all seemed perfect, except for one problem: John's family didn't approve of me. Still, we pressed on, and after college, both of us settling into steady jobs, we became engaged. John had always warned me about his parents' critical nature when it came to their children's partners, so I braced myself for what was to come. Meeting parents has never been easy for me, and the delay in our introduction only heightened my nerves. When the day finally came, 3 years into our relationship, I could feel the tension in the air. They hadn't really gotten to know me, and I sensed they already had their reservations. The night before we were set to meet them, my anxiety was at its peak. I confided in John, my voice trembling. "They're going to hate me," I said, the fear almost suffocating me. John, always the optimist, tried to reassure me. "They won't. Do you really think they'll be shocked by our engagement?" I couldn't shake the feeling that he was wrong. "Yes, I do, and with how judgmental they can be, doesn't this just give them more reasons to judge me?" I responded, my worries growing with every passing second. John, in his usual way, tried to downplay it. "Even if they do judge, does it really matter? Their opinion won't change how I feel about us," he said gently. But it wasn't just my own discomfort I was worried about. I knew how carefully John navigated his parents' expectations, and I couldn't help but feel that this meeting would be more than just a formality. "I know it doesn't matter to you, but it matters to me, and to you, too, maybe," I admitted. "I just don't want this to cause any trouble between us." John, sensing my distress, offered a compromise. "If it makes you feel better, we can hold off on telling them about the engagement for a little while. We can take it slow." His consideration made me feel a little lighter. "Thank you," I said, grateful for his understanding. My nerves weren't just about meeting his parents. I'd spent years hearing about their likely disapproval, and that weighed heavily on me. Over time, I realized that the root of my anxiety lay in the differences between my background and his. His family was affluent, living in luxury, while my own background was far more modest. I had kept the details of my adoptive family's wealth private, never seeing it as important, but now I couldn't ignore the possibility that my humble beginnings might be a bigger issue for them than for us. I hoped that they would see me for who I was, not for my financial history. My naive belief that they would welcome me without prejudice was quickly tested when we arrived at the upscale restaurant we had chosen for the meeting. I wore my engagement ring on a necklace, hoping to keep it discreet, but even as we walked in, I could tell things were already off. John had warned me about his parents' strict punctuality, so our late arrival of just 5 minutes had already set a tense tone. They greeted me with cold stares, and their conversation was entirely focused on John, completely ignoring my presence. I felt small and invisible, unsure how much longer I could bear it. It wasn't until John finally stepped in, introducing me with a forced cheerfulness, that the tension even slightly eased. "This is my wonderful girlfriend, Jennifer," he said, but his parents' response was as frosty as I had feared, with his mother immediately voicing her disapproval. The conversation quickly shifted to my college education, where his father's line of questioning about how I could afford tuition felt like a veiled jab at my background. I mentioned the scholarship I'd received, trying to shift the focus to my academic achievements and the bond one shared with John, but his parents seemed to only see my interest in him as financially motivated. That was the breaking point for me. John, equally shocked and hurt by their insinuations, reached for my hand. "I think it's time to go," he said, his voice tight with frustration. Without a word, we left the restaurant, our hearts heavy, the evening far from what either of us had expected. The shock of such blatant rudeness left me numb, struggling to process my emotions. The drive back from that disastrous meeting was thick with silence, the tension in the car palpable as John's anger simmered beneath the surface. When we finally arrived home, he checked on me, but I couldn't even begin to sort through my feelings. The day had been a whirlwind, and no matter how much I had tried to present myself well, choosing modestly priced clothes, speaking politely, Betty and Tyler had already decided who I was. Their judgment had been swift, harsh, and completely one-sided, without giving me a chance to speak for myself. After the incident, John cut off contact with his parents. They reached out, criticizing us for leaving lunch early, but John didn't acknowledge their complaints. About a month later, he reluctantly told them about our engagement. Their response was as tepid as I had expected. Rather than offering support, they tried to use their financial backing for the wedding as leverage to control it. In the face of their attempts to manipulate us, John and I made the decision to elope. My adoptive parents, who were in France at the time, supported our choice and sent us a lavish painting as a gift, a gesture that, while thoughtful, only made John raise an eyebrow. I dismissed it as a simple display of their generosity, not reading too deeply into it. Our next encounter with Betty and Tyler was at a party they hosted for their anniversary. Despite my lingering apprehension, I was initially relieved to be included. However, the coldness from the other guests was even more glaring than before. No matter how tightly I clung to John's side, their dismissive glances and outright disregard stung. Every attempt at conversation felt like it was met with silence, or worse, an icy reception. By the end of the evening, I was overwhelmed by humiliation, my self-esteem battered, and tears marked the depth of my discomfort. The turning point came when Betty and Tyler were asked to give a speech, in a room already heavy with tension. Their words began as a casual toast but quickly morphed into thinly veiled insults aimed directly at me. What they presented as humor was received with laughter from their guests, and each chuckle only deepened my isolation. Unable to endure another moment of this humiliating spectacle, I quietly slipped away from the gathering, calling an Uber to escape the suffocating negativity. The ride home felt like a blur, tears blurring my vision and sorrow consuming my thoughts. I was still reeling from the sting of the evening's events when John finally returned. His frustration was palpable, and he questioned why I had left the party. His words hit me like a slap, accusing me of embarrassing him in front of his parents. Seemingly blind to the cruelty I had endured, his lack of empathy shocked me. While he acknowledged his parents' behavior, he suggested that I could have gritted my teeth and endured it for the sake of the occasion. His dismissal of my feelings only deepened the wound, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. The argument escalated as John demanded an apology, both to his parents and to him. I couldn't understand why I should apologize when it was his parents who had humiliated me in front of everyone. His stance, however, was firm. He insisted I had embarrassed his family, failing to see the cruelty they had directed at me, his wife. His final words, suggesting that maybe his parents were right about me, cut deeper than I could express. The man who had once stood by me was now questioning my worth, and it shattered something inside me. That night, John chose to sleep in the guest bedroom, creating a rift that felt irreparable. The following week was eerily quiet, the warmth of our usual support replaced by an unsettling silence. This sudden shift in John's behavior left me confused and heartbroken, as I began to wonder just how much this situation would change the future of our marriage. After the party incident, John's parents bombarded me with messages, calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. Despite my attempts to reach out and reconcile with John, he remained distant, consumed with the idea of making amends with his parents, and I was left wondering how we had come so far apart. Swallowing my pride, I apologized to John and his parents, a gesture that felt deeply humiliating yet necessary. I did it for the love I had for John, hoping that this conflict wouldn't define our relationship. But the apology didn't yield the results I had hoped for. As time went on, John's parents, now retired, began hosting weekly family dinners and insisted that John attend. One evening, he brought me along, but the cold reception I received from his family was unmistakable. Their hostility was palpable, and as John mingled with them, I was left alone to fend for myself in a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere. The situation worsened when Betty, his mother, noticed me. Without hesitation, she confronted me, her hostility barely disguised. She made it clear that, as far as she was concerned, I didn't belong at what she considered a family gathering. Despite my assertion that I was John's wife and had every right to be there, Betty was unforgiving. She revealed, with disdain, that they had conducted a background check on me and found me unworthy of their son, accusing me of not fitting into their elitist circle. She criticized my appearance, my background, and my financial status. Stunned, I argued that my character and the happiness I brought to John should be what mattered, but to Betty, those things were insignificant. The confrontation quickly escalated, with her mocking me in front of everyone. John, rather than standing up for me, intervened by offering me money for an Uber ride home. His actions, in line with his mother's disdain, cut me to my core. I left the house in tears, feeling completely bewildered by John's drastic change in behavior. His decision to side with his parents after such public humiliation left me questioning everything: our relationship, his loyalty, and whether he would always choose to appease his family, regardless of the cost to our marriage. I was deeply wounded and frustrated, struggling with the painful realization that John seemed indifferent to the way his parents had used my past against me. It was a stark departure from the man I had known, the one who had always defended me. I wanted to confront Betty and Tyler, but I knew that would only further tarnish my image in their eyes. Instead, I reflected on the encounter. Realizing that I had defended myself with dignity, I had said what needed to be said. When John returned, the silence between us resumed. That silence felt like a growing chasm between us, and I felt more isolated than ever. I had braced myself for another round of accusations, expecting John to demand yet another apology from me, but after the insults from Betty, I found I couldn't summon the strength to appease him again. What I wanted, desperately, was an apology from him, an acknowledgement of the wrong done to me, but that apology never came. As the days turned into weeks, the silence between us became my new normal. I grew accustomed to the solitude, finding a strange peace in the quiet of our home, especially during the family dinners I no longer attended. One evening, as I was alone, my parents reached out via video call. Their concern for me was evident as they asked how I was doing. I hesitated at first, but the weight of the past weeks came spilling out, my struggles with John's family, the demeaning remarks, and the isolation I felt. My parents were immediately angry, their disbelief palpable when they heard about the insults, especially the attack on my orphan past. Their protective instincts kicked in, and they voiced their readiness to confront the elitist attitudes I had been subjected to. I hadn't shared the details of my adoptive parents' affluence with John's family, wary that it would change their perception of me in the wrong way. My parents, unaware of this dynamic, were shocked. They questioned John's role in all of this, why he hadn't stepped in to protect me. The conversation underscored the complicated web of misunderstandings, expectations, and emotional wounds I had been navigating, leaving me painfully aware of the profound disconnect between myself and John. What had started as a simple desire for acceptance, for being loved for who I truly was, had become entangled in societal expectations and family loyalty. The realization that John had chosen his family over me in such a public and humiliating way made me question our future together. Despite my deep love for him, the rift between us had grown too wide to bridge. The silence of the past 3 weeks had, unexpectedly, brought me a sense of peace, a bittersweet acceptance of the situation. I had no idea where we were headed, but I knew the path was uncertain, and I wasn't sure I could keep walking it. When my parents heard about the turmoil I was facing, they immediately stepped up with their unwavering support. Without hesitation, they suggested connecting me with a top-tier lawyer if I chose to pursue a divorce. Their readiness to back me in this difficult decision reminded me of their deep love and commitment. Along with their offer for legal assistance, they hinted at a plan for a bit of sweet revenge, which piqued my curiosity. What started as an idea for a family vacation soon shifted into a focused plan. Just the 4 of us, my parents, me, and my newfound resolve. The prospect of spending time with my parents again, coupled with their promise of a direct approach to my situation, lifted my spirits in a way I hadn't expected. As the details unfolded, my father shared his strategy. We would confront John's family head-on, using their upcoming family dinner as the backdrop. At a restaurant, I was tasked with finding the exact location, a task made easier by the fact that John's parents were avid email communicators. With access to his inbox on my phone, I quickly found the details, marking the first step in my divorce proceedings with the lawyer my mother had recommended. When my parents arrived, we shared a brief but emotional reunion before they whisked me away for a relaxing spa day. It gave them time to prepare for the confrontation ahead. The dinner at the restaurant unfolded with dramatic flair. My parents, known to John's family, arrived and immediately stirred a mix of surprise and curiosity. My father, Mr. Edward, approached the table, and it didn't take long for John's parents to realize the connection. The conversation that followed was bound to challenge the assumptions they'd made about me and my family, possibly altering their perception in ways they hadn't anticipated. As I stood with John and his family, my father made his entrance. "I thought I'd join you for dinner," he announced casually, causing a ripple of confusion among the group. As introductions were exchanged, my father asked about my whereabouts, pretending not to know the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. The family, caught off guard, denied knowing about me, only to be stunned when my father revealed that he was my adoptive father. He questioned my absence, forcing a moment of realization. The air grew heavy as he clarified that I, Jennifer, was the daughter he referred to, correcting the narrative that I was just an orphan with no significant backing. The family's response was immediate, but not as apologetic as I'd hoped. They attempted to shift the blame, claiming that had they known about my influential background, they would have treated me differently. My father, with unwavering resolve, retorted that his wish was for them to appreciate me for who I was, not for the wealth or status that came with my family. In a moment of stark finality, he handed John the divorce papers, signaling the end of a chapter defined by misunderstanding and mistreatment. The aftermath of that evening played out swiftly. My father's influence led to the immediate withdrawal of support from Tyler's business investors, a poetic justice for the disdain they had shown me. As the days passed, I received a barrage of scornful messages and desperate pleas from John's family, a stark contrast to their previous dismissive attitude. John, for his part, signed the divorce papers without further conflict, allowing me to close that painful chapter of my life once and for all. In the wake of everything, my parents and I embarked on a well-needed vacation, a time to heal and reflect. It was a period filled with joy and laughter, a sharp contrast to the heaviness of the past. The experience gave me the space to realize the importance of self-respect, standing up for myself, and embracing the love and support of those who truly cared for me. Though the journey was filled with loss and heartache, it also paved the way for personal growth and a deeper appreciation for the people who had always had my back. Looking ahead, I felt a renewed sense of excitement and hope, eager to see what the future would hold.